everybody gather near. The doctor's in the house, so lend him your ear. The things he can say might even make your day. He might even help your pain go away. The doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. I'm sure he can tell you just what to do. The doctor is in the house.
Ladies and gentlemen, the doctor is in the house. This is Dr. Ron, host of Dr. Ron, unfiltered, uncensored, for the last 6 years. Welcome, and I do welcome you with an attitude of gratitude. And today is going to be a great day on the program because we have a return guest, Mr. Phil Safier, and we'll introduce him shortly. But his show was incredibly well received. That he kindly accepted an invitation to return here. I just want to remind everyone that we started this series that you have to be the CEO of your own body. You have the right to ask questions, get answers before you allow anything to be done to it. We're doing this series is to instill upon you that there are other ways that you can heal, not the Rockefeller medicine model of a pill for an ill. And you're not healthy because you're taking 10 different pills and you say you feel good. Okay, that's not the definition of health. And lastly, but not leastly, the cost of medicine in the United States. Healthcare spending increased from $2.69 trillion to $3.07 trillion between 2016 and 2019. That's a lot of money. And we have the sickest nation. We have the fattest people that are not even nourished because of the junk food they're eating. Everything is going up. Non-medical expenses are rising. Consumer out-of-pocket health costs could grow more than 10% a year over the next 5 years. So that means if you get sick, you're going to spend more money. So on May 31st, episode 437 was Politics and Medicine. They don't mix. On episode 438 is Are Doctors Keeping Us Healthy? Episode 439, we had Dr. William Wong discussing naturopathic medicine. What is it and what can it do for you? Episode 441, I talked about lab testing. If you have to have a lab test, just because it's normal don't mean it's optimal. It doesn't mean it's good for you. There are ways to interpret that, and that's episode 441. And then Mr. Safier came on episode 442 and talked about the breath and breathing. And that how it influences the vagus nerve. So we did a program 443. What is the vagus nerve and why is it important? And then episode 444, we again emphasized that doctors are the third leading cause of death in the United States behind cancer and heart disease. And we went into the reasons why it's important for you to take care of yourself and learn everything you can about alternative ways of treating yourself. So Mr. Safier has agreed to come on again today. He's going to talk about mindfulness. And why mindfulness? Well, it has to do with the vagus nerve again. Okay? And this vagus nerve is the one that can activate your parasympathetic nervous system. It can turn on your body's ability to heal. Now, wouldn't that be great? And this vagus nerve is an on-off switch that can activate the system. And it's a sensory nerve. It's a long nerve. It starts at the base of the brain and travels down both sides of your neck, through your stomach and intestines, and it goes to your heart, your lungs, your throat, your neck, your ear, your facial muscles. It has to do with parasympathetic tone. I'm sure Mr. Safier will go over this when we get him on here in just 1 second. So I'm going to introduce him because he's been a great friend for the podcast, and he's always he's been over 30 years in the natural healing industry, and always brings something good to the table. So, Mr. Safier, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Doctor.
Well, you know, we've had a lot of good input from your past podcast on the breath. It blew me away, to be honest with you. The amount of interest in people that had comments like, I never knew I should breathe through my nose. I didn't know how to breathe through my nose, and how good they felt after they tried it. So here you are. And I would appreciate maybe if you could just give our audience, again, a little bit of your history, how you, in the natural healing methods, and about your company. And then let's get into mindfulness, because it's a great subject, and I only touched on it briefly during the past year, and how I had a program that I titled The Size Matter, and I think people tuned in for the wrong reason, because I was talking about telomere length, and mindfulness can actually increase the telomere length. Ladies and gentlemen, that means you can live longer. Okay, so Phil, why don't you give us a little background, and then let's talk about mindfulness.
All right. Well, I guess I could start back when I became aware of natural healing as opposed to pharmaceuticals and the allopathic model. I actually was born into a family of clinical lab owners. My parents owned medical laboratories where they did testing for doctors in San Francisco. So, first of all, I grew up with parents who had a scientific orientation and taught me a lot about critical thinking and skepticism and things like this. They actually warned me, my mother specifically warned me about doctors and how she had to explain to them the purpose of the tests that they were ordering and what the results actually meant, because these doctors didn't have a clue. So with that background, when I began to become aware of natural foods, which has sort of had a lot of its origins in California and the Bay Area in particular, I was introduced to these concepts of eating properly, the detrimental effects of sugar and refined foods, things like this. So it's been a passion of mine to stay healthy and obviously to live long and to live well. So this has been a theme that's run through my life, and eventually I got into biofeedback and using devices that people would use to monitor things like stress and how to lower that, and how to use brainwave entrainment and cranial electrical stimulation, to name a couple of the techniques that, coupled with hypnosis and suggestion, could do a tremendous amount to, number one, reducing anxiety and increasing good feelings, but could also reprogram negative subconscious dialogues that hamper one's progress and one's health and happiness. So that became my occupation back in the 90s. I started out in the 90s with this, and built a business based upon selling and educating people about this technology. So through the years, obviously, I've used a lot of different nutrients and different types of chemicals and things that would give boost to intelligence and vitality, along with these various technologies that I've mentioned and that people can see at my website, elixa.com. And then recently, during COVID, and even before COVID, as a longtime practitioner of Tai Chi it's close to 30 years now that I've been doing what we call the Tibetan style of Tai Chi, a very rare form, very ancient form, one of the original forms of Tai Chi. I became interested in breath. And through my study of breath and how we use our breath in Tai Chi and in martial arts, how important that is, and then expanding that out into really my hiking routine. I'm an avid hiker. I try to do 3 days a week of around 4 miles, and we're up at 6,000 feet, and we do some decent climbs on a regular basis. And I began to realize that one of the limitations I had to my performance was my breath. And I began to learn more about what a number of these people, McCowan and a number of these other people, have been studying about breath and how to use breath, and it's specifically how to breathe nasally, to use the nose more than the mouth. Whenever possible, you want to breathe through your nose, and that, as you said, has a lot of physiological effects. It increases your production of nitric oxide. It filters the air. It gets you into the parasympathetic. It tones the vagus nerve. All the things that you mentioned physiologically. So there's tremendous benefits from breathing nasally and doing it properly. And I even mentioned last time, and I hope people picked up on this power of humming, that as you exhale through the nose, if you hum, and there's actually a preferred frequency of 130 cycles per second, you increase your nitric oxide production. This increases your oxygen uptake and has tremendous effects on all of your system physiologically. So from there, we want to apply some of these techniques into the other side of our being, which is the mental or the psychological and the emotional. And the quest here would be to get ourselves to a state in which we are centered, more at peace, relaxed, less anxious, less grasping, and we're more in the present. So this gets us into the concept of mindfulness. And breathing properly is one of the best ways to get into this state of, again, ability to calm down and not react to every thought that comes into our heads, which is really the problem. The problem that we're dealing with is our reaction to our own thoughts. And the more we can detach from those thoughts and have a sense of which thoughts are actually useful, most of them aren't. Most of them are a waste of time. They're daydreaming. They're worrying about the future or feeling regret at the past or various pain and trauma that we've encountered. All these things that can occupy our attention. Instead, when we get into this flow state of the parasympathetic, and we get out of the fight or flight part of the nervous system, and we get into this other state, now we can detach more from those thoughts. And what I'd like to emphasize here is that this has an effect not only internally in terms of our own peace of mind and sense of ease, but it has to do with the external world. We are consumers, and we're constantly being sold. And not just goods. We're being sold ideas, belief systems. We're constantly being bombarded, and we're taught, we're expected to buy into various concepts. And most of these concepts don't really make a lot of sense. They benefit somebody. The benefit is usually for the person who's spinning this stuff at us. So how do we counteract that? How do we come and become intelligent consumers? How do we understand the concept of buyer beware? And we want to be aware. So awareness is the key here. And if you become aware of your thoughts and of your feelings in a more objective, detached manner, then you will not react as quickly. You'll be able to pause. And this even gets into the concept of Count Korzybski in General Semantics, who taught that our real sanity lies in this ability to stop and to pause and not be reactive like a Pavlovian dog that salivates when the bell rings. And for most of us, every day, we live in this trance state where we are reactive and we do react in this Pavlovian manner. So we want to get out of this state of hypnosis, of trance, and become more present-based. So mindfulness has to do with focusing our attention on the present moment. And it's very important that just to get that concept of time, that really the only thing that really exists is the present moment. And we've been taught this by any number of teachers and psychologists and physicists that really this idea of the future and the past, both are imaginary. And there's good uses for this stuff. You learn from the past and you plan for the future. But you have to get into the present to become centered so that you can make rational decisions. If when you get into the future or the past and you're dwelling on these things, you tend to be more anxious. And when you stay in present time, again, you become more centered and rational. So there's many benefits of becoming mindful, getting into the state where you're aware of what's going on around you as well as what's going on inside you. And you're able to process all these things in a dispassionate, detached fashion where you're not reacting to them, you're not judging them, you're not saying good and bad and all these things. Instead, you're more, we like to say, you're more zen, you're more chill, and you're in that state where you have more equanimity. And you're not, again, not reactive. I keep coming back to this point of reactivity, which actually goes into the physiological concept of inflammation. So in a way, when we're not in the present, we're in a state of inflammation. And if we can stay in the present and be okay with the present moment, really be at peace with the present moment, even though that moment may have some pain in it, there may be suffering in the present moment, as there might be joy. But whatever it is, we have a different relationship to it. We're not tied to it. We're not in a state of stress over what's going on in the moment. We're able to be flexible about it. And we have more objectivity about what's going on. And again, this makes us more rational. And it's part of being able to think critically, is to be able to see both sides of a question, or all three sides, however many sides there are to a particular issue, to be able to listen to all these things. And this even goes for our relationships with other people. That the more we're in this state, the more we're able to meet people where they really are and be compassionate and less judgmental about the other person. And we're able to relate to them and allow them to express themselves. So there's so many benefits to being in this state of mindfulness that we can go on and on about things like emotional regulation. When you're in a mindful state, you understand your triggers. And you know when you're getting into a state of inflammation or this red zone where you become angry, uptight, scared, again, into the state of fight or flight. But once you can actually see these triggers, you see this word or this person cause you to get your hackles up. Once you become aware of that, you bring awareness to this, you have a different position. And you're less likely to get entangled in this and go off on a tear. and probably do something that you'll regret later. So instead, again, you can pause, and these triggers don't have to set off a reaction. In other words, you can feel this happening, and you can continue breathing in a relaxed fashion. Again, keep coming back to the breath. And remember that when you're getting triggered, the physiological solution is actually to breathe nasally. Inhale, increase your exhale. And you can even do that box exercise that the SEALs and the Special Forces do, where they inhale for a count of 4. They hold for a count of 4. They exhale, again, through the nose for a count of 4. Hold the breath for a count of 4, and then repeat that a couple times, and it doesn't take much. So one of the great advantages of these techniques is that, number one, they're totally free, and they're completely natural. They have no side effects, no deleterious side effects, and anyone can do this. It's not a question of intelligence. It's a question more of your will, your desire to stay in this state and to remember to breathe properly. So it's really extremely simple, and although it's incredibly powerful, again, it's very simple if one will simply remember to do this, and it takes practice. I've actually heard one of the people who talks a lot about breath say, if you will do this for a month, it will become more automatic, and that you will tend to stay in this state more. Again, we're looking for the ability to regulate ourselves. This has to do with our EQ, which is the emotional equivalent of the IQ. And there's actually ways of measuring this. And you can raise your EQ. While it's kind of difficult to raise your IQ, you can actually raise your EQ simply by becoming more mindful and less reactive. And another benefit of this is that as you're grounded and more in present time, you're less susceptible to what's coming in at you, and you're more centered. And it's almost like in the martial arts, where the first thing that you're really trained to do is to stand, and to stand in a centered way. In some schools, you spend a year or more just standing before you learn any of the moves. You have to learn to center yourself. So this centering that, again, proceeds from proper breathing and mindfulness helps us remain poised and ready for whatever happens. So go ahead.
So Phil, just let me just remind our audience that what Phil Safier is talking about is your health, because everything in our life vibrates and has a frequency, and the present is a present. It is a present to ourselves, the way I look at it, and to try and stay in the present. And when you have low vibrations, when you have negative thoughts, that's when you get sick. And I was just looking, and I found some statistics that only 1 out of 100 people are in the parasympathetic mode. Most are still in that caveman brain that has fear. They're going to be attacked. So that's what we're talking about. Get out of the sympathetic mode, that fight or flight mode, where you have a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. And you know what? People talk about acidity. Your blood gets more acidic when you're in that mode. And acidity is associated with lots of bad things like cancer. That's low vibration. And it has to do with how you feel about yourself. Okay? Because if you have low esteem, you have low vibrations, and as Mr. Safier said, you have inflammation, then proliferation, then fibrin, and then scar tissue. And you get tight. Okay? Your muscles get tight. So this is really a great subject, and just to bring in a little science, I see here that scientists have shown that loving kindness meditation has a positive impact at the cellular level. It influences the telomeres. That's the end part of the chromosomes. The longer they are, the longer you live. It's an indication of our aging. So I just want to throw my two cents in here because I think it may sound esoteric, mindfulness, but it's not. It has applications in our daily lives. And I was always taught it takes at least 21 days to instill a new habit. But mindfulness might be longer because of how we are bombarded in our toxic world. So sorry to interrupt, but I just had to put my 2 cents in there, Phil.
Yeah, no, these are excellent points, and one of the things that I'd like to come back to is this idea that this technique, these ideas, are actually very simple, yet very, very powerful. Some people would have you believe, and they tend to be psychiatrists and doctors, that the solution to your depression, your anxiety, whatever it is that's bothering you, is either some medication or some kind of therapy that requires endless hours at God knows what the rates are these days for a psychiatrist or psychotherapist to work out your issues with your birth trauma and your parents and all these things. Whereas really, when it comes down to it, this is something that's happening here and now. And if you learn here and now to get yourself into this state of relaxation and centeredness and rationality and the ability to let thoughts pass, let the emotions pass, see them as almost happening to somebody else. See that these thoughts that seem so very important really, for the most part, are not important. They're not particularly useful. They're not helpful. They're actually causing you stress. And then when you go down one of these thought trails, your mind gets involved in something else as opposed to what you are, what you're actually going through. So, for instance, again, I get back to my hiking, which is part of my practice to keep myself fit. But while I'm hiking, I practice mindfulness, which means, number one, watching where I step. I'm walking on stuff that one misstep, and I've done this. I've gotten hurt in years past because I was daydreaming, and I wasn't watching where I was walking, and I slipped and got hurt. And now I realize that part of mindfulness is just watch your step, buddy. Don't fall. Number one. Then number two, how am I walking? How is my stride? What am I doing? What are my feet doing? What are my legs doing? Am I relaxed? Am I upright? Am I breathing properly? And I probably mentioned this, but I came up with this trick of maintaining nasal breathing by keeping a mouthful of water when I walk. And anybody can do this, whether you're hiking or walking, whatever you're doing, you have the opportunity to become aware of a tremendous number of things that if you focus on them and see them as your actual job, all the other thoughts, the extraneous thoughts about the past or the future have no place. They simply can't occur. Or if they occur, they're dismissed very easily because, again, you have work to do, and the work is awareness of what you're doing in the moment, both in terms of your own safety and in terms of your own performance, how to get the most out of this time, how to make your body stronger, how to maintain your strength, how to clear your lungs out, how to get your heart beating, getting things circulating. All these things are happening while you're performing these activities, whatever they are. Anything that you do can be enhanced by becoming mindful and becoming more present and not dwelling again in the past or what you've got to do in half an hour. So we need these times. You can do it as much as more is better, of course, but even sometimes during the day to just get into this state where you're in present time and you're as relaxed as you can be. And there's a number of techniques for doing this. Again, there's sitting meditations, which is fine, but this can be part of your everyday life while you're washing the dishes, while you're vacuuming the floor. Any number of situations can always be improved by mindfulness and staying in the present moment, paying attention to your breathing, on and on and on. And the effects of this are almost unbelievable in terms of how you'll feel, the fact that you're not reacting as much, you're not getting as angry or irritated. And if you do, you have a way of getting out of that and getting back into the parasympathetic and chilling out. By the way, that word chill, I wanted to bring this up because I know that you have some connection with cryotherapy.
I do.
Yes, and I recently started going to a new spa here that offers cryotherapy. So I've done a couple sessions. The last one was at minus 180 degrees for a couple minutes. And it's really striking what happens afterwards. You're not shivering, but you're chill. You get into this state. And out here, of course, we've been in Albuquerque in New Mexico. We've been pretty hot lately, as have a lot of places around the country. And no matter how you try, it's difficult to actually beat the heat. But the cryotherapy is quite amazing, and it's kind of expensive. However, it turns out that you can do this by yourself. You can create this what's called the diving response or a diver's reflex. You know how when you're on a hot day and you go to a lake or a pool or whatever and you dive in, there's a shock. And immediately your system, your heart rate slows down, a number of things happen, and you get what are called cold shock proteins. And you can do this just with a bowl of ice water, or even an ice pack. Just put it on your face. And for 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you can tolerate, if you make yourself cold there, you will evoke this response, and you'll get more into the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. It affects your heart rate, and you'll become clearer, and you'll sharpen up, and you'll feel less tired. So I just wanted to put in a plug for cryotherapy here.
But I agree with you, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago, that what cold exposure activates your parasympathetic nervous system. But, you know, it has other physiological effects, Bill. It dilates your blood vessels, and that blood flow goes to your body, and where do you really need it? Your brain. Right. And it just turns on that system, and you really do. You get rid of that fight or flight quite fast when you're that cold. But I agree, and I say, you know, just putting. Actually, the research has showed that cold stimulation just to the outside part of the neck will engage that parasympathetic nervous system. So you get a cold pack, put on either side of your neck. So you're absolutely right on with your suggestion. And that's what we want to do. We want to get more vagal tone, less inflammation, less stress, healthier vibrations. And these are the ways to do it, with the breath and any way you can increase vagal tone.
Right. And again, I want to take one little step here and just say that since we're dealing with an info war, I like the term info war, we're constantly being bombarded with propaganda about everything. Advertising for products and services, political propaganda, medical propaganda, it's all propaganda. And again, if you stay more in the present, you will be able to read situations more accurately. And you'll be able to understand that you're being spun and that you have a chance to stay unspun, if you like, and present. So I want to, again, make it very clear that what we're talking about here is not just about your own inner state, which is very important, but also it has to do with the external world also, and how you are in the world and how the world affects you and how you affect the world. So, again, there's so many benefits of mindfulness. There's a ton of information. It's all free. There's no need to spend a lot of money on this stuff. If somebody wants you to take a course for hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or go to an ashram or this and that, you know, again, caveat emptor, buyer beware. You don't need to do that. This is your natural state. You're built to have these abilities. It's not something that you have to learn to do. You simply have to become aware of this quality, of these abilities. So it's yours for the taking, literally. No matter your situation, you can get into these states on your own. Go onto YouTube. There's tons of people talking about breathing techniques. There's tons of people talking about mindfulness. A lot of different spins on all this, but it's really rather simple. There's some basic ideas here. Again, focusing attention on the present moment, being non-judgmental about what you're perceiving, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, quieting down this inner dialogue, and getting off of autopilot. We're really walking around on autopilot like little robots. And we want to get off of that, and we want to have more control. But again, the control comes not from grasping and getting tighter. It actually comes from letting go of these thoughts that are driving us nuts.
Well, I agree, and I've often told our audience that happiness, Phil, is a lifestyle. And right. You have, and you have to forgive and love yourself. And mindful meditation is one way to get there. Because as Phil said, and I like things that rhyme. We're used and abused, schooled and fooled on a daily basis by that tube that is in front of us, hypnotizing us, causing us to experience a mass psychosis. So this is another tool now, mindfulness, and it's not something that I have talked about over the years. Do I practice it? Yes. And do I love music therapy? Yes. Do I like grounding? Yes. Do I love color therapy? Yes. But I've done this in my circle, but now I really Phil Safier has maybe want to get this knowledge out to everybody. Okay, and he said it's free. It doesn't come with any. There's no charge. So,
and what you pay, the payment that you make is attention. You have to want to do this. You have to remind yourself to do this. At the beginning, you forget, and you go, but you remember. But as you remember more, it becomes more and more habitual. So it's almost paradoxical that you want to become an awareness robot. You want to have an automatic sense of becoming present. So that's what we're shooting for. And it is doable, but it takes practice like anything else. But that's the payment that you make, is in effort. But it's a payment that pays off. You're paying it forward. You're doing intentional suffering, necessary suffering, instead of suffering unnecessarily by ruminating on the past and worrying about the future. If you make the effort to stay present, it pays off big time.
Just great words. And that's a lot for first-timers to absorb and digest, I'm sure. But maybe you might want to listen to this podcast a couple times and tell your friends about it. And this podcast is on Podbean, Podbean, Dr. Ron, Dr. Ron, Unfiltered, Uncensored. But we're also on Apple. We're on Alexa. We're on Google Podcasts. We're on Podpage. And we just have been listed in the top 25 doctors' podcasts on the Internet. We were in the top 50. Now we're number 23. We're in the top 25 now. And people are downloading our program from all over the world. I'm just looking at the latest stats: United States, Australia, Ireland, United Kingdom, and Brazil. So I don't know how this is happening, but I do have an attitude of gratitude about it, and we want to get the word out. How to be healthy without taking drugs. I mean, medicine is important. Don't get me wrong. I am a medical doctor. And for emergencies, we're the best. But medical care is not health care. Doctors are not taught to keep you healthy. They are taught to give you a pill for whatever ill you have. And we have to talk more about the mind and spirit because it's, you're not only what you eat, and your diet is not just what you eat. You know what else it is? What you watch, what you listen to, what you read, and even the people you hang around with. Okay, they could all affect your vibrations and your health. So, Phil, any last closing words, and what are we going to talk about next on the next podcast?
Well, of course, we could talk about this forever because it's a very deep subject and it has lots of ramifications. And it would be interesting if your listeners would ask questions and maybe say where some things don't make sense to them or what they're confused about, anything like that, or additions that they have, techniques that they've used that have helped them. That'd be nice to get a conversation going around like that. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that I do have some notes on breathing and things like this up at my website, which is Elixa, ELIXA.com/breath. So if you go to Elixa, you'll see a number of the technologies that I'm talking about that are very useful. But I'm moving away from selling products and moving more into simply being a resource for people to help themselves, ideally without spending a lot of money, or any if possible. So that's where I'm at, and I'd love to have a conversation with anybody who wants to. You can reach me through my website.
Okay, we can do this, and I will call you after we hang up and tell you how we can arrange a live podcast. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Dr. Ron, Unfiltered, Uncensored, with special guest Phil Safier. Is it Safer or Safier? How do you pronounce your name?
I say Safier, but really just don't call me late for dinner.
Well, we won't call him late, but we'll definitely invite him back to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, we'll have Dr. Will Wong talk about the naturopathic approach to bioidentical hormones and whatever else comes to the famous Dr. Wong's mind. And we'll keep you informed on how to take control of your own health, how to be the CEO of your body. Okay? And if you listen to last week's program, you'll hear about a woman who was just suffering in the hospital. Just no communication between physicians. Hospitalists are a disaster. I'm hearing from a lot of comments on this woman's plight. Her son was kind enough to come on and explain how it's affected everybody. So you want to stay out of the hospital if possible. I hate to tell you that. It's not what it used to be. Okay, I'm going to call it a day. I thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Have a great week.
Hey, everybody. Dr. Ron's finished for today. I hope you got some good wisdom for what the man has to say. If it's all about good health, he's the man you got to see. He has a lot more answers for you. So tune in next week when the doctor is in the house. Or when the doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house, the doctor is in the house, the doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. I'm sure he can tell you just what to do. The doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house. So if you have a pain, call the doctor. If you have a strain, call the doctor. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house, the doctor is in the house. See you next week.